Greetings! My name is Larry Walters, and as I mentioned in my last video, we're here to talk about land-based finance for local governments. Importantly, what we're really talking about is how to bring about change. Local governments need more revenue. They're going to be expanding rapidly in the years to come, and especially mid-sized cities, they need more revenue. And they need revenue that they can control. And so we're here to talk about how do you bring about change if that's what you're interested in accomplishing. If you really want to implement a land-based finance tool or expand its use or reform its use, how do you bring about change to make that happen? We're doing this in the context of leveraging land, a land-based finance and local government training package put together by GLTN and UN Habitat. It consists of their 2 volumes, both of which are readily available for download from the GLTN website. There's a reader that describes 7 different instruments and provides 21 cases showing how those instruments actually work in different contexts around the world. There's also a trainer's guide that talks about training strategies and tools that can be used to help people understand how these tools function and how they can be applied in specific contexts, and to help people adapt those tools to their local context. The training is as we've thought about it, it should take 3 to 4 days. You're not going to be able to cover all 7 of the modules in those 3 to 4 days. But if in a 4-day training, you can get 5 out of the 7. And so in advance, there needs to be some consultation with the people involved to identify which of the modules seem to be of greatest interest. And those can then be abstracted and focused on during the training session. For each of these tools, we have a similar structure. The unit talks about timing. Timing differs depending upon the tool. In some instances, you'll be saying, okay, we have somebody who's coming to the municipality to obtain permission to do a particular activity, to redevelop an area or an urban extension. Perfect time to use some of the tools. In other instances, you're saying, okay, we have to maintain this infrastructure that we've constructed. We need ongoing revenue to be able to do that. Different set of tools that are available in that case. So the timing matters. Also, the description is provided for each of these instruments as well. What are we actually doing? What are we charging for? And can it be paid in cash, in kind, in land? How does it actually work? The third area is what are the appropriate policy goals? In some instances, we're trying to simply recover the cost of infrastructure. In other instances, we're saying we just created a bunch of wealth for these private landowners, and we think the public should be able to share in some portion of that increased wealth that the public created. Perfectly legitimate goal, use a different set of tools depending upon what the goal is. Finally, we talk about the minimum requirements. What are the minimum policies and capacities that you have to have in place to make the tool work effectively? And we do that for each of the 7 modules. In addition, we provide case studies. In the case of developer charges, as you see on the slide, we have a case for Medellin, Colombia, which has been very successful at using developer charges. And we have another case in Cairo, Egypt, which has been very unsuccessful at using developer charges. And so to compare and contrast those two, to say, okay, why does it work in Colombia, but it doesn't work very well in Cairo? Understanding the cases and seeing the application of the tools in different contexts allows you, as the participant, to reflect on what works and why it works in some contexts and not in others. The last day of the training, you're going to be involved in developing an action plan. Remember that I talked about success and what success would look like. Success is not that you understand and thought, wow, that was an interesting few days that we spent together. We had a good time, we had good food. Success is you understand the material, you recognize what it will take to actually make change in your community, you've developed an action plan to bring about that change, you're committed to carrying out that plan, you have a set of colleagues that you're going to be working with to make that happen. That's success. And so now what I want to talk about is, how do you do that? The first step is to critically compare. You're going to talk about several instruments over the course of these days. And you're going to, and they were selected because somebody thought they would be potentially interesting. In point of fact, you're going to find that some are more relevant than others. Some are going to be easier to do than others because of your particular context and history. So critically comparing those instruments and saying, well, this one might work, but this one over here has got a better chance given the factors that I understand, okay? And then you need to say, all right, if this is what we're going to focus on, what are the most critical tasks and functions that have to be carried out in order to use that instrument effectively? You identify those, and that's not always easy to do. You have to think about, well, what are the functions that have to be carried out, and who has to do them? Where are they being done at all? If so, where in the government is that happening? And who has the capacity? Okay. So then you have to recognize the administrative requirements necessary to bring it about. By that I mean, you may say, all right, these functions, yes, we're doing them. Some we're doing better than others, but this function is carried out in this agency over here. Maybe these are the people that issue building permits. And this function is carried out over here. Maybe that's the people that actually monitor and do the land use planning. And they may or may not talk to each other. In some cultures, the agency that controls the land is not the agency that approves building. Okay? And they don't talk to each other very well. Well, obviously there are some administrative issues that have to be addressed if that's the case. So it's not that they have to be consolidated, but you have to understand the need for communication and you have to design that. So what are the administrative requirements necessary to use this tool in our particular context? Then you have to recognize the political, legal, and other environmental factors that have to be addressed. Are you going to have to change the law? If so, what's the process for doing that? And who's going to take the lead? Are there other political issues? Can we anticipate wealthy landowners being resistant in some way? Can we anticipate real estate developers being resistant? Can we anticipate the public not understanding very well? Whatever the factors are that you have to address, they need to be identified. Okay? And then you come up with a prioritized list of activities. What are we going to do in what order? And then you're ready to move to the action plan. So what is an action plan? Let me talk about what that development process looks like. Let me first talk about the difference between strategy and action plans. Strategies have to do with goals, about where we want to go and how we want to get there. They provide principles, they provide policy frameworks, they focus on issues, they cut across different interests and groups and actors. They provide the medium and the long-term guidance. Okay, that's their focus. Action plans, on the other hand, translate that guidance into concrete commitments for action. They focus not on the goals, but on the actors. Who's going to do what, when? They operationalize the strategies in relation to each actor, and they concentrate on activities in the immediate and short-term future. Strategies, long-term, where are we headed? Action plans, who, what, when, now. Okay? So, first step of an action plan. Elaborate more fully the intended courses of action. Okay? So using that description of tasks and functions that you generated that describe, okay, if we want to do this instrument, what specifically has to happen? And so you have to then ask, what's the current status of each of those? What are the legal requirements to be able to do it? What human resources are necessary? What's our organizational structure need to look like? So you have to determine the tasks that are required to move the implementation forward. Step 2. Now that you've identified the specific tasks, we have to talk about who's going to do it. Who's going to carry out those specific actions? And by what time? And in what implementation framework are we going to be using? what resources are necessary, and who will be the lead actors in order to be able to do it. So now we've taken that list of actions and we're assigning it to specific individuals. It's not good enough to say, well, the government needs to. No. I want to know in which agency and which actors in that agency are going to take on that responsibility. Okay. Step 3, determine the required resources. And here's one of the most critical ones. From my experience in a variety of contexts around the world, success in bringing about change will require support from senior political leaders. And so the question is, which senior political leaders will support your plan? Who will the champion be? And it has to be specific individuals, and they have to be pretty senior in the government, because they have to be able to go toe-to-toe with other senior officials and say, I understand what you're saying, we're going to do it anyway. Okay? They have to be able to insist that the change happens. They don't have to manage the day-to-day process of change, but they have to be supportive of the overall plan and supportive of the actors who are trying to bring about that change. Identifying who the political champions are is absolutely critical. Next, we have to think about the financial and the human resources. Change does take people, it takes money. They may be scattered through your organization. No one may have enough expertise. You may need to bring in outside help. You may need some additional financial assistance, either from a budget allocation or from a donation of some sort. You have to identify what resources are necessary, both on financial and human, okay? Where they are and how you're going to marshal them in support of your plan. The fourth step is to identify the gaps and the weak links. Plans don't work out the way you anticipated, the way you wanted them to. There may be some financial costs that were unanticipated. There may be some resource requirements, other kinds of resource requirements that you simply didn't anticipate. Okay. You need to recognize where those things could be and design a way to either overcome the weakness or work around it. Okay. Important part of the action plan. Fifth step, agree on how you're coordinating with others. Bringing about change is not something that one individual can do on their own. It takes a team effort. So the colleagues in the room with you right now are the place to start, because you're all going to formulate an action plan together. You're all going to take on specific assignments and roles in implementing that action plan. But you may find that you need other people as well, and that's great. Okay? But you have to then figure out, how are we going to inform, how are we going to coordinate, how are we going to check in with each other, how often. Be clear and be explicit. We're going to meet for lunch every Tuesday for the next 6 months, or until we've achieved this particular goal. We're going to meet once a month. We're going to have a conference call periodic. Whatever it is that works, given your particular setting and resources, be clear, be explicit, how you're going to coordinate with each other, both for support of each other and to collaborate on how things are going and what needs to be adjusted. Because the last step is you're going to agree on indicators and monitoring so that you can see what your progress looks like, and so that you can adjust the plan and adapt it to changing conditions. Okay. So you're going to come up with a template that looks something like this. Okay. You've got specific actions assigned to specific people who have a goal to accomplish it within a specific time frame or by a deadline of some sort. You're going to identify the resources that they need to have and resources that they need to develop. You're going to talk about weaknesses or possible roadblocks that they may encounter and how those individuals are going to coordinate with others. This is just a rough template, but you can see how it works. You can identify the various steps. Again, the objective is to say, let's take what we've learned and turn it into a plan to bring about the change that will make our community better, that will give us the resources we need to help the people who live in our community at all levels. I hope that you've caught the vision of what an action plan is all about. Take the learning that you're going to go through, work hard, think carefully about how it's going to apply or how it might apply in your particular context. You're going to evaluate several different instruments, and you're going to find that some are more relevant for you than others. Understandable, happens all the time, that's what's supposed to happen. Focus on the ones that are most likely to achieve success. And then really drill down and understand, okay, what has to happen very specifically in our context in order to bring that about? Do we have to change the law? Okay, who has to change it? Are there ways that are there precedents for doing it? I'll give you one example. In Egypt, they decided that they wanted to use a betterment levy collected over a period of time. Okay? And they said, well, we've never done something like that, they thought. But as they looked around, they said, well, we did exactly that. We did it in the area of irrigation. We did it with irrigation improvements for farmers, and we collected the cost of those improvements over time. We did do it there. There is precedent in our society. That's the kind of thing that you want to look for. So what are the precedents for either using this tool or using something like it that you could adjust and modify, expand, improve on to make it a richer implementation and to help generate the revenue that are necessary for your community leaders. Okay? Find the tools that are most likely to be used. Understand clearly what has to happen to make them work in your society, in your community. Come up with the action plan. Who is going to do it by name? Give it a time frame. You may have to adjust the time frame. Give it a time frame anyway. Report back to each other on how well things are going, both for the mutual support and reinforcement, and also to understand, well, maybe we need to revisit this particular element a little bit. We didn't understand it as clearly as we thought we did. We need to lay it out differently. We need to adjust the time frame slightly. But you've got a plan that you're working on, and plans are not cast in concrete. They have to be adjusted and adapted. You can do that. Your objective is you want to bring about change to generate the revenue necessary to improve your community. That's your goal. Thank you. Now go out and change the world.